All right, hey, here we go. I'm coming at you with a live reading from the book I'm working on at the moment, which is the sequel to The Grand Illusion, Book 1. It's been 7 years since I published that, so it's been a while, been a long time coming. I've been working my butt off on this since August 2019. So getting into a lot of funky stuff, getting in super deep, a lot of very high-level analysis that is very, very hard to find in this kind of realm. So we're going to talk about, in this sample, we are going to talk about spirit release, spirit entities, many worlds, soul fragments, and this kind of fun stuff. So let's get into it. I will begin my little reading. This is an excerpt from what is currently chapter 6 of The Grand Illusion, Book 2. Here we go. I hope you enjoy. So, there are other options to drug treatments in many cases of physical or mental illness. One is called spirit releasement or release therapy, SRT for short. After discovering a book by one of the pioneers of spirit release therapy, William Baldwin, in a secondhand bookstore, my friend who heard or was hearing hostile voices made a booking with and had a session done by a nearby practitioner of spirit release therapy, which I'll share momentarily. First, though, we need some background on SRT and Baldwin. Baldwin originally plied his trade as a dentist until 1982 when he learned hypnodontics, that is, dental hypnosis. This he used to eliminate fear of the drill and needle, control gagging, minimize swelling, and maximize healing. In one advanced hypnosis workshop, he experienced himself in a prior lifetime, something he eventually came to see as a life-changing event. From there, he read what he could of the books produced by therapists developing the past life field and set out to learn how to perform past life therapy himself. By 1981, he began performing regressions on clients, and 10 years and several thousand therapy sessions later, he produced a book called Spirit Releasement Therapy, A Technique Manual. Here is where Baldwin's research provides a different angle on most past life research, and it is thoroughly shamanic. He discovered that, and I quote, physical and emotional trauma can apparently cause loss of soul fragments. Such trauma and the lost soul fragment can be discovered in this or an earlier lifetime. Past life therapy can assist healing this condition. The techniques used to locate the source of a current problem can also lead to the discovery of an attached entity that is causing the problem. This also can involve the present or former lifetimes. The entity or entities are carefully and permanently released to the light. That is the light that the souls of the dead go to immediately following, usually immediately following the death of the physical body. One seemingly bizarre aspect of Baldwin's above quote is that he states the fragment can be discovered lingering either in this lifetime or an earlier one. Immediately, this creates problems for the linear rational mind. How can a soul fragment exist in a moment of the past that no longer exists? We must remind ourselves that the division of time into past, present, and future is a figment of our linear mentations, or specifically the way that our biological organism actually organizes its perceptions and constructions of information. In the super hologram, all events exist now, simultaneously superimposed over one another, rather than existing one after the other as time seems to flow forward. Put succinctly, we are dealing with the idea of non-locality through time. String theory and the many worlds interpretation of physics is, believe it or not, pretty consonant with the notion of a lost soul fragment being stuck in the past. If we hark back to Brian Greene's space-time loaf metaphor, we can visualize that each slice of time or moment in time in the loaf exists independently as a self-contained parallel universe that exists in the same space as every other self-contained universe. This is a variation on the many worlds theory. It's as if all instants in time, or all time streams, exist overlapping one another in superposition, and as consciousness illuminates them one at a time, they decohere instant by instant, moment by moment, from the adjacent moments or slices, each one splitting off to create another parallel reality no longer in phase with the previous moment or slice in time. So we end up with fragments of our own holographic mind splitting off into parallel holographic worlds, as a trauma or maybe a fixation compels part of the mind to depart and separate from the individual and continue to inhabit what we perceive as a different moment or slice in time. You may recall the two Oxford professors, Anne Mobley and Eleanor Jourdain, who in 1901 were walking through the garden of the Petit Trianon at Versailles when they spontaneously witnessed the scene shift all around them back to a time period in which Marie Antoinette had actually been alive. It was very interesting to note that one of the people who appeared in this scene from the past actually consciously recognized and interacted with them as if they were there in this different time frame. So the misplaced soul fragment is conscious and self-aware, and it's impelled by the original owner's conscious and subconscious desires and emotional impulses. So this gives us a clue that the phenomenon is connected to the astral plane. Although the notion of soul fragments that can exist separately to us and even attached to other people may sound far-fetched, we shouldn't forget that the subconscious mind is part of an integral whole and is itself conscious at its own level. Subconscious simply denotes any part of the psyche operating below our conscious threshold of awareness, running parallel to the processes of our conscious mind. The subconscious operates with far greater information processing and computational power and memory recall and the capacity for non-local information retrieval. Baldwin's research also indicated that in cases of dissociative identity disorder, DID, another psychiatric condition, some of the alter personalities speaking through his entranced clients claim to be past life personalities of the person, and some claim to be separate entities and not part of the persona at all, while others claim to be spirit guides or helpers. Michael Newton's subjects under hypnosis spoke matter-of-factly from the soul or superconscious level in explaining that souls can and do divide themselves in order to tend multiple tasks at once, both in the spirit world and on Earth. As we've seen, the holographic soul has the capacity for not just but multi-location, and only a portion of a soul's energy is ever put down into a physical body. Additionally, some souls spoke freely in support of the many worlds vision of reality, stating that souls can and do frequently enter these parallel reality systems to suit their needs. Like other therapists who successfully employ past life therapy, William Baldwin found that sessions often brought immediate and permanent relief from symptoms and conditions that had plagued his clients for years. Like other therapists, Baldwin treated people who had no prior belief in the survival of consciousness post-mortem, and yet almost uniformly they changed their minds on that. In fact, most of his clients discovered discarnate interference. A scientifically minded investigator, Baldwin ultimately formed a hypothesis similar to the historical description of spirit possession. In the early 1900s in Los Angeles, Dr. Carl Wickland had actually developed the forerunner to SRT by providing an entranced medium for attached entities to speak through, instead of them speaking through the hypnotized patient. With help from intelligences in the spirit world, he persuaded attached entities to leave the aura of the patient whose light had attracted them, in the process curing people diagnosed with so-called insanity. Hereward Carrington wrote in 1919 that Wickland had, quote, cured scores of obsessed patients, that is possessed patients, every year by treating them along regular spiritualistic lines. Okay, back to William Baldwin. Baldwin was assisted in his work by Judith Baldwin, his wife, who was clairvoyant, fortunately, and could perceive discarnate entities of all kinds. She could also determine the degree of soul fragmentation and gather information regarding past life carryover of unfinished business, as well as being a skilled counselor herself. So she was a very formidable accomplice to Baldwin. She has continued his legacy since he passed, so you may be wondering what they discovered. Baldwin found what appeared to be three main types of intrusive entity. Number one, the earthbound soul, which includes deceased humans, terminated pregnancies, and mind fragments of living people. Number two, the dark force entity, which includes the classic demon. And three, the ET, the extraterrestrial, which includes aliens and otherworldly beings. Baldwin notes, however, something that clairvoyants and occultists everywhere can relate to. There are many other interfering energies and entities in addition. He was eventually forced to abandon his ideas about a benign spirit world because of this work. His attached entities clearly recalls the notion of piggybackers and hitchhikers spoken of by out-of-body explorer Robert Monroe, as well as Robert Bruce, respectively, those terms. Perhaps spirit attachment sometimes results from someone returning to their body after an out-of-body experience with an entity attached, perhaps knowingly or unwittingly, depending on the OBE's perspective. Robert Bruce states that in cases where people have been unable to shake off such entities, he's referred them to good shamans with positive results. This is why DMT research pioneer Rick Strassman states that spiritual and shamanic training is so crucial. We need to be ready to grapple with the bizarre and arcane. Many clairvoyants and shamans can attest to the fact that on lower astral planes, we are wont to find all sorts of strange and at times troublesome entities. So, lest we make the mistake of thinking that all perceptions of attached entities are simply subjective internal perceptions, we should note a case from Drs. Brooke A. Keller and Wayne J. Goss, Australian Polycontrast Interference Photography Practitioners, PIP for short. That is the technology of Harry Oldfield's, which is based on Kirlian technology. So they've been visiting their friend Peter's house, where they set up their PIP system, concerned about him after witnessing him going into turns of being choked and trying to fight off what was choking him just to gain the next breath. So he's being assaulted apparently by some invisible entity. On other occasions, they'd be enjoying a meal together when he would start chatting to something unseen by them. On top of this, his legs constantly jiggled and he displayed several personality types during the course of the day, as well as being indecisive. Keller and Goss recall that they set up the PIP, and began scanning Peter. Quote, "Then we saw something truly amazing. There was a python-like creature swarming all around him. It appeared to attach itself to the neck region and rotate itself around the waist and genital areas of the body. We had thought he might have an entity or entities attached to him, and now we had tangible proof of this, both for us and our patient." So no doubt that as the technological precision and acuity of such equipment improves, so too will our ability to peer into the astral and to gaze at some of its inhabitants. Dr. Stephen Greer, founder of the Disclosure Project, had actually stated in an interview with Kerry Cassidy and Bill Ryan, formerly of Project Camelot, that secret black op technology now exists to literally manifest an astral entity here in third density on the physical plane, which is an incredible disclosure that pushes even my involved threshold. This indirectly suggests some other radical possibilities if you think about it. And you can find the interview on YouTube, unless it's been taken down. It's also highly significant in this context that Ian Stevenson, after his monumental research into reincarnation, also concluded among his findings that more than one spirit can occupy the same body. Oldfield's technological visions here, or diagnoses, are important because machines don't hallucinate or suffer from purported chemical imbalances or shaky consciousness. And that's why we have to mention another case of his, which he presented at his Glastonbury symposium recently, or not that long ago. An image he displays features a PIP scan of a woman who was a crack cocaine addict, as a matter of fact. Oldfield describes it as a frightening picture because where the woman's eyes should be visible, we find instead an almost demonic, to use his term, pair of eyes overlaid on top, as if some astral entity had attached to her, occupying her body. Around her are face-like images, perhaps, of other attached entities, and this is what Oldfield infers, pointing out half a face with an eye and other very sinister-looking features. Tellingly, the woman admitted to Oldfield that she heard voices and that they told her to do antisocial things, like steal and murder her parents. These are hallmarks of schizophrenia, the kind caused by entity attachment, as the disparate work of many researchers is clearly beginning to prove. And you may recall my aforementioned clairvoyant and clairaudient friend who heard voices telling her to go and hang herself and do other horrible things. These converging lines of research are clearly not a coincidence. Here, if appearances are anything to go by, we are not dealing with the Jungian shadow or a Freudian anything. We've head-on encountered the astral plane proper, albeit indirectly through electronics, not quite as good as direct clairvoyant observation, but getting there. I should point out that I personally believe substance abusers are great favorites of astral parasites. I've noticed in two different people, one a regular pot smoker, or probably a heavy pot smoker, and the other an angry, aggressive fellow who spent time in jail and was very likely into substance abuse of some form, a sort of subtle demonic overlay in their faces, their facial features. It was really noticeable to me in the latter instance because a twisted and gnarled look characterized his face where before there was no such appearance. At a later stage, many months later, I saw this same guy again, and his demonic overlay had basically subsided. It seemed like he was in a far better place in his life and psychologically. Astral parasites are mostly interested in the psycho-emotionally, psychologically disturbed. Stuart Wilde has also noted a connection, that is Stuart Wilde, the quote urban shaman. He's noted a connection to attached entities and alcoholism, and we will elaborate on this connection shortly in some mind-blowing ways. According to spirit release practitioners, some of the indicators of spirit attachment include the following. Number one, sudden changes in behavior such as eating, drinking, or sleeping, depression, increase in anger, rebelliousness, fear, or suicidal tendencies. Number 2, physical pain, typically not accompanied by the usual laboratory or X-ray findings. Number 3, serious illness of unknown cause. Persistent and non-responsive infections have been shown to be caused by attached earthbound entities who suffered from or died of such an infection. When the entity left, so did the infection. Unusual inflammatory or metabolic disorders and blood dyscrasias have disappeared after depossession. Number 4, loss of energy. Sudden diminution of physical energy is another factor that's suggestive of possession. Number 5, sudden onset of drug or alcohol abuse. In such cases, the possessing entity is usually the one who did the indulging in drugs or alcohol. When influenced to finally leave, the entity usually takes the urge to use those substances with them. Number 6, memory and concentration problems. Number 7, inner voices, hearing inner voices. Number 8, multiple personality disorder, now currently known as dissociative identity disorder. Many of the multiples may be attached entities. If that is the case, the treatment of choice is depossession, which when completed removes the alternate personalities. Careful evaluation may be needed to determine whether or not what appears to be DID is really in fact a possession. And we can also add gender dysphoria into this mix. Number 9, repetitious nightmares as well, another indicator. Baldwin found, like others have, that when it came to soul fragmentation, the reason behind it was often trauma. He found in the literature various cases of people who had been molested, causing a dissociation of their consciousness from the body in order to escape the trauma. Some OBEs, out-of-body experiences, are catalyzed in this heinous way, as the certain members of the satanic elite know. Soul fragmentation is just a coping mechanism, however. Some of the parts don't return to the body/mind, which can eventually cause serious problems. The personality has been shattered. DID illustrates this clearly, as many people have provided details from their own lives showing the ways in which different personality alters are split off and created by extreme trauma, such as rape or other forms, in order to escape the pain and terror in an act of self-preservation. Most people are often found to suffer physically years later as a result, and even die far too young if the trauma is not addressed and healed, and the different personalities integrated back into the whole once more. Between 95 to 100% of multiple personality/dissociative identity disorder cases have a history of childhood incest, torture, or other abuse. Each alter personality has its own psychophysiological profile as well, which may include pain responses, left or right-handedness, ability to heal and rate of healing, response to given medications, allergic reactions, eyeglass prescription or not, diseases such as diabetes, epilepsy, and arthritis, appetites, tastes in food and drugs. An altered personality may be the opposite gender. This can lead to cross-dressing and transvestism and transsexualism, the desire to undergo sex change surgery. An attached earthbound entity of the opposite gender can influence decision-making, and because it occurs at a subconscious level, people don't actually realize what's happening. This is highly pertinent information for 2020, given the mass programming of the populace into perceiving gender transition as fashionable and desirable, one form of insidious population control enacted by the self-appointed elite of this planet. After all, men without genitals are less likely to reproduce. Dr. Richard Day described to a gathering of pediatricians in the late 1960s the high-level geopolitical agenda to deliberately manipulate children into gender dysphoria and transgenderism, stating the plan was to turn girls into boys, basically. In the 2000s, we watched this agenda play out in all its dark glory. During soul spirit release therapy sessions, the therapist directs the client's mind to locate their own missing soul fragments wherever they are. This way they can be integrated once more into the overall personality structure. According to Baldwin, people often unconsciously describe the condition of soul fragmentation with the following euphemisms, such as shattered, falling apart, out to lunch, nobody home, not playing with a full deck, broken-hearted, stole my heart, empty-headed, not firing on all cylinders, one foot in the grave, need to pull myself together, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. And I'm going to stop there. That wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed this little sample of Book 2 of The Grand Illusion, A Synthesis of Science and Spirituality. It is on the way. The goal is to have it released this year in 2020. And one final note is check out the, if you're looking for this, if you're looking for spiritual development and evolution at an accelerated and deeper level, you might want to check out my free masterclass, which is at evolveyourself.live. All right, with that said, I'm going to leave you to enjoy your day or night, wherever you are, and have an amazing one. We'll chat again soon.